I took an extremely long class for the BAs, and I think they have disappeared. I must have said my bye-byes to them. So I suppose some of you will also disappear over time if I teach like this. What say you, Maria Jose Gomez Arieta?
Sorry, Professor?
Will you be disappearing? Eat. You can eat even in my classroom, actually. I am there in front of you. You can eat.
Sorry.
The thing that is banned in my classes is alcoholic beverage. Only alcoholic beverages and cigarettes. You can do anything else. Eat, drink, cook. You can do all those things. No, seriously. Seriously.
Okay. Can you please repeat, Professor?
Can I what?
You can repeat. You asked me something.
I asked you something. You want me to repeat that? So are people going to come, or are people going to do a Houdini after today? Huh?
I don't know.
That's a very, very confident answer as far as I am concerned. When you say I don't know, it means I know. And I don't want to tell you. Okay. I'm not such a dumb fellow, Maria. Sometimes somewhere my brain works. Right off. So let's get back to what we were doing. What were we doing? That's a big question. Anybody who can tell me what we were doing?
Well, sorry. I guess we are in the, you explain about, some meanings or some concept about the, I remember in Spanish,
Yeah.
the name of the, some schools to approach some concept of research. What is research, search and research? Milesian and Eliatic school, you do a kind of, a kind of short speech about it. And you talk about Socrates, about Plato, about what is the real concept of citizens, politia, ontology, epistemology, and all these kind of things.
Right. But I had talked a little more than that. I had talked to you about the importance of language and structuralism was what I was talking to you about. I actually ended with Noam Chomsky, who says we are already born with structures of knowledge, of languages in our head. And that is why, irrespective of who your parents are, if you're brought up in a particular family that speaks a particular language, then you learn that language. Okay, so somebody who's born to Argentinian father and a South African mother can very well speak Hindi if they are brought up in a Hindi-speaking household. So what Chomsky is saying is that structures of language are already there, built in our head. All that they need is an impetus from the outside world, and then the structures will get activated. Now, this is loosely speaking structuralism. Structuralism has a very different, not different, broader definition than this, but I don't want to get into that now. I just want to do a little bit of leapfrogging from the Greeks down to the modern period, since we already started talking about structuralism and Chomsky. Okay, so I'll talk about structuralism in a bit, but let us try to understand what is it that those who belong to this structuralist school, or those like Noam Chomsky, what are they basically saying? What are they basically saying? They are emphasizing the importance of language in research. Okay, the importance of language in research. So, what exactly are we? I'm not recording. Where am I? Sorry. Just forgive me, huh? I'll be just doing this because I'm in a bit of pain. Yeah, so the thing is that this particular period, which starts in the late 19th century with Ferdinand de Saussure, who is basically a Swissman. Ferdinand de Saussure started the structuralist movement, but it was adopted by various people. So if you look at Ferdinand de Saussure and all these people, they emphasize upon the structure of language in order to basically convey ideas properly. Okay, so typically, again, this is a watered down version, a simpler version. Typically, a structuralist will say, there are three things that are important in language. The three things that are important in language are the first one is syntax, or if you like, call it drama. Then you have the second one, which is called semantics. And semantics is something that conveys meanings through the use of language. And the third bit is that which is called semiotics. Sorry, it's called semiotics because of the fact that uh, semiotics believes that all language need not necessarily be spoken. All languages need not necessarily be spoken, languages can also be used by taking recourse to symbols. So now, when it was Ferdinand de Saussure, he called what he did, he called it semiology, but Chomsky prefers to call it semiotics rather than semiology. That is because he says semiology becomes too formal a study of certain things, and formalizing something to that extent basically again could lead to the sacrifice of content. So he basically says that if you do it as semiotics, then it is like semantics. Okay, there's no sementology. So it's like semantics. So let's go right back to syntax, the first one. Uh, so what is syntax? Simply put, it is grammar. Grammar is what? Grammar is the protocol that you use in order to speak, and you will be conveying uh, ideas through the adherence to the rules of a language. If you don't adhere to the rules of grammar or syntax, then you will not be conveying anything. You will be making a mess of something. Like, let me explain what it means. If I say Maria went away in the day, I don't know, that is a sentence. Okay. So, but what sense is it making? It's not making any sense. It's not making any sense. So you need to have a protocol laid down in order to uh, basically, what should I say, in order to make the other person understand what it is that you are saying. See, I'll give you a very simple example. I had a teacher in school, an excellent teacher, uh, but her English was a little weak. So my mother was also a teacher, had a nasty habit of going to my teachers and finding out how bad I am being. Okay, and my mother asked, so how is he doing? Is he paying proper attention in class? So this lady said, he's doing, he's doing. So my mother said, what is he doing? No, he's telling. He is telling. So you see, these are grammatically correct sentences. He is doing. He is telling. But they are danglers. What is he doing? What is he telling? Is he telling a story? Is he telling something else? The idea that that lady had in her mind was that at that particular time, I wasn't keeping too well. So I got a few less marks than I usually used to get in mathematics. So my mother was saying, yeah, actually, he has not been well for a few days. So this lady says, he's telling. That means that was what he was telling me. But if you make it he's telling, then that is grammatically a correct sentence, but a senseless sentence. He is doing. What is he doing? The mother wanted to know how I am doing in class. So she should have said he's doing all right or not very good or whatever. But she just said he's doing. So that is an incomplete sentence. Though grammatically, syntactically, it is fine. So you cannot reduce the whole of language only to syntax or grammar. You can't reduce it to that. You have to understand the protocols of a language. How are they to be used? And how is it that you will convey what you want to convey to somebody through the use of language? Now, let me give you a small example here. Okay, we are saying that what do we want to convey? This is grammatically correct, but it is not telling us anything. It's a dangler as a sentence. Now, this basically means that the protocol is in itself insufficient. Adherence to grammar in itself is not sufficient in the conveyance of ideas or in the exchange of ideas. Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example of a perfectly grammatical but totally nonsensical sentence. Okay. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor of California, probably twice, but while he was in Salzburg, Austria, there uh, they had this movement that started in Vienna, which was called the Vienna Music Circuit, and this Vienna Music Circuit played. It was an ensemble consisting of 6 people, and they played songs from Beethoven. And Beethoven actually, uh, people think is somebody who was for democracy, but no, Beethoven was not for somebody for democracy, but Beethoven actually was anti-feudalism, and I can go on. Can you make anything out of this? We started with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and where have we ended? That's I. There is no grammatical error anywhere. Okay, so this is how syntactically you can construct meaningless sentences or sometimes unintended meanings. Let me tell you something that happened, a big goof up that I myself committed. While I was a student of Nizam College, it was not this pathetic college that it is today. It was a decent college. More than the teachers, it was the peer group that we had, uh, which was really really good. And so we used to have these guest lectures in the lunch time. And you wouldn't believe it, the Salarjung Hall, which is a pretty big hall, was full of people, right up to the rafters, as they would say. All people would come. And so this was the turn of a person whose name I cannot recollect, but he was an astronomer. And he was talking about why astrology is not very different from astronomy, and how the scientific element in astrology is exactly the same as it is in astronomy. Okay, so he says astronomy is not a perfect science. If you call astrology alchemy, then you should also be calling astronomy alchemy. So it was a great lecture. But, the lunch period, he had exceeded by probably 3 minutes. And an exodus of people started walking out. An exodus of people started walking out. So I felt very bad, and I was to convey the vote of thanks. So I was frustrated. I felt, what kind of behavior is this when somebody you've called from outside is coming and talking to you about something that you don't know and you should know, perhaps, and you're walking away. He's reached the end. So what if it's lunchtime over? 2 minutes, 3 minutes? So when I went to the lectern to say, to give my vote of thanks, I said, first and foremost, I thought I was being funny, sarcastic, whatever you want to call it. I said, thank you to all those people who patiently are sitting here. Yeah, some people were sitting there. Now, immediately, that was interpreted by the guest speaker as he was delivering a terrible talk, and I was basically saying that, you, in spite of the fact that it was so boring, so terrible, you were sitting and listening to it. Thank you for that. It seemed like that. He said, no, really, is that so bad? I said, why? It's an excellent talk. But you said, for patiently listening to me. Then I realized the stupidity of that construct of the sentence. Thank you for patiently sitting before I thank the speaker. So I sent an entirely wrong message. I had to go and apologize to him several times. I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed at this goof up of mine that I had to go and really apologize to him. And I told him, sir, bless me, otherwise I will not take it that you have forgiven me, because that was not my intent at all. My intent was something else, and it came out in that stupid fashion. So you see, there was one intent behind the construct of that sentence. What was essentially, what came out of that construct was essentially the opposite meaning, the opposite of what I meant. I was thinking that I was you know, saying something nasty to my fellow students, and it appeared to a number of people, not just the gentleman who delivered the lecture. It appeared to a number of people that I was making that thing as this was this horribly boring lecture that you sat through. Thank you. So, syntax, which is what everybody emphasizes. In my days, we used to have this Wren and Martin. Now, our English is changing. First, it started changing with spelling. COLOR became color. Okay, and uh, wherever on Gilmour, MOUR became GILMOR. This is what the Americans have been doing. That is linguistic imperialism, by the way. This was being done deliberately, and the computer became a wonderful tool to correct you when you wrote the correct spelling. When you wrote the correct spelling, it started telling you that that spelling is wrong. So program is program. Okay, I'm a stickler for the actual English because it's not just a question of spelling. I don't know if you've heard Americans see a bit of Netflix now and then. There's this guy picking up a phone and asking you or asking someone, where are you at? What kind of sentence is that? Isn't it sufficient if you say, where are you? What is where are you at? So you see, Americans have also been tampering with basically to impose their kind of English. Their kind of English. They have been doing their best. But fortunately, the Brits fought back and they started writing programs which gave alternative spelling. So you could use the British spelling. So you could choose UK, English UK instead of English US. Nowadays, you can also choose uh, English India, which basically means you can say things like, what are you doing, Ray, or something. Maybe that also will go. I'm not sure of that. But so there was this attempt to try and reduce the influence of the British in the English speaking parts of the world by changing first spelling of words and later on by changing the construction of sentences itself. Suppose you ask me, I tell you, I'm sorry I didn't come for the class yesterday. Uh, I actually was somewhere. Then you'll say, where were you? I'll say, I went to a movie. Did you go alone? I'll say, no. My friend and me, uh, we went together. But the Americans have started removing my friend and me. It is my friend and I. The word me, they have made it redundant. They have made it redundant. They now say I. So language is an extremely important tool, especially in research. If you want people to understand what you're saying uh, properly. There could still be a few misunderstandings, but you have to minimize the problems of misunderstanding. Funnily enough, the solution to this particular problem, or I would not just call it a problem, I would call it a problematic, PROBLMATIQUE, problematic. Does anyone know what a problematic is? Because the Americans write it as a problematic, and we Indians say this fellow is a problematic fellow. He's a problematic child. That's not what it is. Problem child, not problematic child. So what is a problematic? A problematic, imagine, is a fountain. Okay? It is throwing water like this. But this fount where everything begins is itself a problem that is creating further problems. So a problematic is the generation of more and more problems from one problem. So you have to take that word in its French origins, because if you try to simplify that into English and make it problematic, then you're speaking bad English, nothing else. And Americans will say herbs. So on one of my trips to America, I made a good friend with a chap called Herbert something. So I used to call him Herbert. He said, my name is not Herbert, it is Herbert. But I said, you people say herbs, no? You don't say herbs. So I thought it is Herbert. So he said, I know you're a very dirty fellow. You're joking around with not just me, but my entire country. Anyway, so that apart, so pronunciations. At one time, we wrote history with A. A history of colonial India. That's what we wrote. Today, the Americans are writing an history. They don't say history, they say history, because obligatory, they don't say obligatory, laboratory. So they don't say a historical. It's a historical event. No, it's an historical event. Why have you made that H silent? It's just arbitrary. There is no meaning to it. Missile. Okay, I can understand that you want to simplify pronunciations of complex words with complex these things. So you say missile instead of missile. Okay, All right, I accept it. But what I cannot understand is why do you say automobile when it is actually automobile? It's just that you want to change the language. Okay, so we have to be very, very sensitive to these kind of issues, issues of use of language, which is very, very necessary. And what you will see is that the British analytical school, consisting of people like A.J. Ayer, uh, Gilbert Ryle, uh, these people, it was called the British Analytical School. Once the philosophical investigation took the linguistic road, then the British Analytical School intervened and intervened in a very, very correct manner. So, what did the British Analytical School say? Let's start with police, POLIS. Can you talk about state and uh, the African police, POLIS? Can you talk about the Venezuelan police? Was there a police there? There wasn't. There was no police in India. But Indians are writing books which are called state and government in ancient India. Ancient India neither had government, because that's institutions, neither did it have a state. A state is a modern construct. It is a construct that consolidated itself into a meaningful entity somewhere in the, what should I say, somewhere in the uh, 16th century. And it was done for a reason. And civil society doesn't have one meaning, it has many meanings. There is the Greek meaning, there is the Roman Latin meaning, then there is John Locke's meaning, and then there is Hegel's meaning, and there is John Stuart Mill's meaning. So if you just say civil society, which of these different meanings are you using? So the British Analytical School says that if you are looking at a word with a history of multiple meanings, then it is absolutely incumbent upon you to specify that when I am saying something like civil society, I am not using it in the Hegelian sense. I'm not using it in the Lockean sense. I am using it in the contemporary sense where civil society is equated to non-governmental organizations. So you'll have to clarify. You'll have to clarify every word that carries a multiplicity of meanings. Multiplicity of meanings is something that has happened because of the translations. Okay? Because of the translations, the number of translations that have happened over a period of time, it's because of that, like I told you, civil society in Aristotle is koinonia politicae. There's no polis in Rome. So it is societas civilis. It's a civil society. A Locke civil society consists of members who have a certain amount of property. Not everyone. Not everyone. Similarly, if you look at the language of rights, if you are constitutionally guaranteed rights, which every democracy says we guarantee rights to our people. If you have a constitutional guarantee of rights, then why was there that talk of human rights? Why did there have to be a declaration of human rights in 1948? So it was Tom Paine who talked about that long before that. Why did people have to talk about it? And why did civil rights, the talk of civil rights came up in America? Why did it come up? So, if you have rights, that means you're saying nothing. What are these rights? What can you do with these rights? So they have to be specified. So if your constitution says, I give you the freedom of speech, why am I afraid to say something about the ruling government? Because even if you go by the UAPA law that is there in India, it says that if you talk seditiously about the state, then you can invoke UAPA. But Modi and Amit Shah are happily invoking UAPA when anybody criticizes their government, the style of governance. So, you see, this is a minefield, an absolute minefield, which every researcher has to negotiate. You don't have a choice. You really don't have a choice. You have to negotiate this minefield without getting blown off. And the beginnings of this linguistic turn and importance that it has today, it can be attributed to a number of people, but for our purposes, I would like to do it starting with Ludwig Wittgenstein. Is a very interesting character. He wrote a book called Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, in which he said something about language. And then he wrote another book, Philosophical Investigations, which completely contradicted what he had said in Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. So I had promised you a short lecture, but I don't think I'm capable of giving short lectures. Anyway, sorry about that. And I'll see you on Monday. Or do I see you tomorrow? Feel free.
Monday, I guess.
Monday, you guess.
Mhm.
All right, so we shall all guess that it is Monday and it is 6:30 on Monday. Now, that's a good guess because usually on Sundays there is a Formula One race in the evening. So I'm addicted to Formula One car racing and MotoGP motorcycle racing. So when those things are there, my life suspends everything else. So, all right then, I'll see you on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Good night.
Good night. Have a nice weekend.